Welcome to PR After Hours, your weekly cocktail of news and interviews with leading thinkers in PR, marketing, and business. So pull up a chair in our virtual lounge. Your host, Alex Greenwood, will be right back after this.
Hey, folks, today I'm welcoming back someone who's become, frankly, a favorite around here. It's Rob Ashton. He's an author, researcher, cognitive science nerd, and, as he puts it, someone on a mission to rescue communication from pseudoscience. Now, if you've ever rolled your eyes at another self-help post promising to fix your writing with a handy set of cliches, Rob is your guy. He has spent years digging through peer-reviewed research to sort fact from fiction, then translating what he finds into usable insights for real people in real workplaces. He founded Emphasis in 1998. Since then, more than 70,000 people around the world have gone through its programs. That includes Google, the Big Four accounting firms, and even the royal household at Buckingham Palace. In other words, when it comes to clear writing and how our brains actually process information, Rob has receipts. Now, this is Rob's third visit to the show. Also happens to come as PR After Hours prepares to close our doors, at least in this format. And I wanted to make sure we had him back while the lights were still on. Then again, endings have a funny habit of turning into beginnings. So who knows where our conversations might turn up next. But we're going to catch up on what Rob's been working on since we last heard from him in late 2023, what he's learning from with the latest research on communication and cognitive science, and why so much of what passes for advice on LinkedIn and in best-selling business books still rests on sand. Rob Ashton, welcome back to PR After Hours.
Hey, Alex, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. It's great to be back.
Oh, it's great to see you and to catch up. And, you know, it's funny. We were back and forthing. I guess it was on Substack more recently. And it's like I kept saying, gosh, it's been a few months since Rob was on the show. I should check with you. Then I went, oh, my gosh, it's been almost 2 years. So I'm so glad you're back. And I wanted to, if I could, kind of when we left our hero, that would be you. You were doing a pretty popular e-newsletter, for want of a better term, on AI, the AI writer. And I was just curious, what happened with that? How did that go? And what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that, because I basically, I have to confess, I abandoned it, which is, you know, it's one of those situations where I mean, I'm a former journalist like you, and you know, you get on that news treadmill that you know. I remember once when I was on a magazine launch, and I think somebody said to me, you know, you've got 6 months to get the first issue out, and then you've got 1 month to get every other issue out after that. And this was, the AI Writer was a weekly. I did it as a way of just educating myself really on what was going on with AI at the time. This was just after ChatGPT had gone had kind of hit the public consciousness, and it was you know, it was the drinking from the cliched fire hose. That's what it felt like, and it was a combination. There were a lot of promises at the time. Microsoft kept saying, you know, we're incorporating Copilot next month into Office 365 as it was in, and didn't. So I'd write these stories about, hey, it's coming. But then there was so much happening at the time that I just burnt out, and I had to park it. I don't publish the AI Writer anymore, but I am very much back into the whole AI debate, very much so. And, you know, I'd say for the last 6 months, that's something I've been thinking about a lot. So, you know, maybe we can dig into that.
Well, you know, that's the reason I did bring that up, is because just to establish your bona fides in this, you know what you're talking about. You were immersed in AI, for want of a better term, for a long time there. And early on, you were probably, my friend, the first legitimate AI expert, and I use that word sincerely, that I had on the show. And I was just dipping my toe in the water a little bit, and then I would, of course, read what you wrote about it, and I got to say, I want to kind of tell you a little bit, if it's okay, about my use case for it, if that's okay. And then
please do. Yeah.
And please, when I'm done with that, come back at me and say, my friend, you got to stop that. Okay, so here we go. So, you know, I do a lot of writing on Substack now on all the Fits That's News, which is by the way, Rob mentioned offline. He says, you know, I don't really, it's an old newspaper term, all the news that fits. And so I thought, I'm always not only am I, a former journalist and I'm just kind of playing with words, I'm also like printing, writing my things that give me fits. How's that? So anyway, very bad writing. Okay. Anyway, I digressed into another area we should go to. So, but Rob, I started with ChatGPT and then I got into Copilot just long enough to realize I hated Copilot. Our university uses Gemini, and so I'm learning more about it. It's all right, but what I found that works for me, I have an hour and 20-minute drive each way to work every day, right? So I hit Chat GPT and I talk to it. I'm driving, so I can talk, and I say, looking at a new Substack essay, I want to cover this topic, and this topic. I'd like to pull information from this writer, and I've been reading Robert Greene's Mastery, and I'd like to take some of what Robert Greene says about going from basically an intern and an apprentice all the way to the road to mastery. I might just talk all those things in there, and then I'll say, give me an outline, and then by the time I get to work and I get on my lunch break, I'll go look at the outline, and then I'll play with the outline a little bit more, and I'll say, thanks very much. I'll go write my drafts, run it back through, tweak that, look for sources here and there to bolster what I'm saying. And then when that's all done, I hand it over to my friend Claude. And I let Claude, which I think is a better writing companion, I let Claude look at it, and I'll give Claude a really tough prompt on myself. I'll say, hey, Claude, as an editor for The Atlantic, usually when Claude stops laughing, says, well, let's adjust for you, Alex. And it gives me some good suggestions that I often use. So that's my use case for it. And I have found that it really, having that outline just kind of helped me a little bit. I've never been much of an outliner, but now that I've got my beginning, middle, and end. I can source it properly. My productivity, such as it is, some people like it, some don't. I have 100 subscribers. I have some paid subscribers. They seem to like what I'm doing. It's gone through the roof. And in fact, as I was telling you offline, I'm almost enjoying the writing again more than the podcasting. And I've been podcasting for 20 years. So that's my use case. Wondering what you think, and then maybe it could circle back to kind of where you are with AI.
Sure. Well, I think that's all good. I think there are good ways to use AI and bad ways to use AI, and pretty much all of what you say there, I think, is a good way to use it. You have to use it mindfully, consciously, whatever adverb you want to pick. I have to say, you're saying about talking to ChatGPT. I was doing that myself until about 6 months ago. It is a very good way of doing it, and the voice I chose, it's a female British voice. And,
that's what I use.
But I stopped when it started doing this little flirtatious giggle at the end of the answers, and it's like, whoa, I'm not ready for that. It's kind of like so it was. I think it's so good. It's so there's absolutely no hesitation. It feels like a real conversation as long as you tune it correctly. And it's interesting because I've tried using it a couple of times recently just to demonstrate it to someone, and I realised that I needed to, if I was going to do that, I needed to retune it again with the instructions, because every answer is a fairly long answer.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you just say, if you want to try and treat it like a human being, and which can be useful if you're trying to have a back and forth and get your brain going, you don't want it to, if you say that's great, I'll come back to you later. You just want it to say, okay, no problem, not yes, that's great. And if you have any more questions, and it basically repeats what it's just said.
Yeah.
And so but you can change that. So I think with all of these things, as you said, you give it when you use Claude, you prompt it to act like an editor at The Atlantic. There are things with settings with all of them now where you, as where you can give it a style guide, you can give it a custom dictionary, which can then apply to all of your conversations, so you don't have to do them every time. I find that really, really useful. With the kind of brainstorming or trying to get up to speed on a particular topic, of course you have to be very careful there, because ultimately they are all programmed to please, and if they don't know, can't remember the last time I ever got a response that said, I'm sorry, I don't know. You know, I might come back and give you the wrong response, or whenever I speak to people who are using this stuff for the first time and, you know, they try and get it to use some new function. So let's say you're using ChatGPT and you try and getting it to use some new function, and it will often say, I can't do that. And then they sort of have to go back and say, actually you can, you've been updated, and you know, go online, check the documentation for the latest version of ChatGPT, you know, and you have to instruct it to go back and read up on what it can do, and then it will come back and say, "Oh no, you're right. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, what?" You know, so you know, it's a bit, it can be a bit strange, but outlining, yeah, I've got a lot to say on that because I think that can be really good. So maybe we can come back to that in a minute. But the way I use it is you know, it is to increase my productivity. I use a note, personal knowledge management app called Obsidian, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be familiar with. And it's open. I don't know if it's open source, but it's basically got a whole community around it, so you can customize this thing with plugins. One of them is something also called Copilot, which works really well because it enables me to interrogate my own database of notes. You know, and I can say, what have I done on this? You know, please find all of my relevant notes and give me an overview with links to the original notes. You know, it's the sort of thing that I'd never dreamt of being able to do before. Or I can use sound files. You know, I can do a daily log, a voice log, and then just sync that to Obsidian, and then the next day just you know, say, okay, give me a summary of what I did yesterday. Which, I mean, I have ADHD, and it's a very, very good way of just getting back into the flow, because, you know, one of the common things with ADHD is you just, you know, like yesterday is a foreign land. It's like, oh, I can't remember what I did yesterday. And even if I look at a list of things, it won't mean anything. It would just be like a list that somebody else wrote.
Right.
And it can be very good at just nudging me back into the day. I even vibe coded an app that would do that and send me a welcome message over Telegram each morning, just saying, "Hey, let's take a look at what we did yesterday." I stopped using it because it got a bit too sycophantic. I think it was running ChatGPT in the background. But yeah, you know, there are all sorts of things you can do, and I think that's all great. I think that's all great, and, you know, we should use it. I don't think that's how most people are using it, or a lot of people. Who knows? I can't say how most people are using it. I haven't done the research, but I think a lot of people aren't using it like that, and I think that may not end well.
I'm very wary of letting it do too much thinking or writing for me, particularly because I think I have a bond of trust with my subscribers who read that, and particularly the ones who pay for it. But to everyone, I think that my stock in trade is my credibility and the fact that I'm a writer and legit, and I do this. And I've read some stuff that is patently, obviously, just maybe second draft pulled out of some AI from other writers, and that's, go with God. That's your thing, great. But there's just so many little tells still, and you start to, and if I see that on a regular basis with somebody, I'm not mad at them. I get it, but I just maybe don't want to continue to re-up for that kind of thing. So I'm very careful of that myself. But I'm blatant about using the image stuff because I'm not a graphic artist and I don't want to pay for stock images. And forgive me to all my graphic artist friends, but I can't afford you. And so I'm happy to say the most creative thing I can do is describe, you know, a particular image I might want and see if chat can do it. And chat, you know, it's hit or miss. And some of the imagery I just settle on is clearly been settled upon. Anyway, the thing you're talking about too with the Obsidian stuff, and I don't know about that. I wrote that down. I'm going to be looking into that. But and the ADHD factor, I have close colleagues, or at least one who has ADHD, and it is fascinating to what you said yesterday. Is in, like, would you say, an unknown land or something like that? It's
foreign land, yeah.
Yeah, and these folks that I work with who have this or know of, I don't understand it. I mean, I think we all have our own tendencies. I know as I get older, I'm a lot more what I call scattered about things. And one thing I've done, and it's probably, I think people at work think it's quaint, but I don't care. It works for me. I've invested in these note cards, and I went analog, Rob. I bought all these lovely Ellington fountain pens, and I've made every morning the things I've got to get achieved as a part of my system, and then it goes on a little rack in front of me all day, and I can mark off the things I've done, and then anything I didn't get done today I can transfer to tomorrow, or if I realize, you know what, that's not going to happen for weeks, I can, as another card that says soon or someday, I can put it there. And it's just one way of me taking my head out of the, out of the zeros and ones and just getting it down to the very, 19th century stuff that seems to be helping me stay organized. Curious if you have any thoughts on the analog movement.
I do. I've recently started reading books. I mean, they're like paper things. It's like a pile of paper with kind of this card. It's sandwiched between two pieces of card. And I rather than reading it on a Kindle on my phone, and the reason I've got loads of books on my shelves, I just never read them. I'll be out and about, I'll read something on my phone. I quite often have three versions: the audio, the Kindle, and the hard copy. Often several copies of the same book, by the way. I refer you to my previous response about ADHD, where I've completely forgotten that that's a good book, I'll buy that, and then find another two on my shelf a year later. But there is something different about reading a hard copy book. I'm not one of these people who says that if you listen to the audio version of a book, you haven't read it. But it is different. It is different. It is different. I find that with that, let's say I'm listening to an audiobook on a walk. If I take that walk again, go to take the same route, I'll find, even if it's a week later, I'll find at a particular point in the route, I'll remember what I was listening to at that point, which I think speaks to the connection with the real world again, which is a kind of an analog thing, really, I suppose. But with reading books, I just find it different. I find I can, I scribble notes to myself in the book, and then I'll record those as voice notes and get AI to put them in my note system. It's kind of, cause I think that's the trouble with analog books is that, you make, with digital ones, you can use AI, not AI, you can highlight, use Readwise to just gather together all of my highlights in Kindle and then put them in a vault where I never look at them again. Yeah. But with the working a book in this way, I can make notes to myself and then I record them, and then that goes in my daily log, and then the next day I will kind of refactor that, if you like, kind of just split it into different notes and just say, oh, that's what I was reading yesterday, right, I will put that, I'll link it to another note. But that's that. But with writing, analog writing is different. It's definitely different. I mean, if you think about it, it's obviously different. You are using a pen or pencil, to scratch images on symbols on a bit of paper. You're not looking at a screen, so you're not going to get drawn into your screen. I think that's one of the problems with doing that particularly on your phone. You've all those other, all the world's information is just a tap away, and your ideas have to be pretty good to compete with that.
Yeah.
No offense, mine aren't.
Nor mine.
So you've got that, but then also you've got the things that are going on in the brain. When you read something, the cerebellum in the brain is very active because of the eye movement that's required. Eyes move in these little jumps called saccades. We kind of read in little hops and then join them together. But when you're writing, it's a lot more than that. You've got to control, your left or right arm, and it is different in that way. But there have been studies that show that that does affect the thinking process as well. I think it affects it in a very beneficial way in that it is less overwhelming. I think research has shown that when you are writing like that with an analog, the process in the brain is significantly different. You'll probably make connections that you wouldn't make if you were just typing. And I don't think there's anything to beat that feeling of just like scrunching up that bit of paper at the end of the day and chucking it in the recycle bin. It's and even transferring stuff that you haven't done the next morning and go, right, I need to put that on my list again. The act of moving it from one list to another, it's like, well, I'm selecting, I'm choosing. Do I really want to write that down? or do, am I still going to do that? Somebody said to me probably about 20 years ago, when I was using one of the early PDAs, the personal digital assistants, before the iPhone, before any of those things, a Palm Pilot. Palm Pilot. And I just showed him this thing proudly, and he said, yeah, the trouble with that, Rob, is it never forgets. And humans need to forget, because you don't want something that's just going to remember every single thing you tell it, because that list is going to get very long very quickly. Which I find, whenever I come up with some new system or some new app, I feel wonderful to begin with because it all feels under control and doable.
Right.
And then within 3 weeks, it's like, oh my God, what are these things on my list? And it's still reminding me about them, and they don't mean anything to me anymore. So I think that going analog gets around that as well.
What an extraordinary thing to be told. I had a Palm Pilot as well, and I do remember an elder, I don't mean elderly, but an elder friend of mine saying, kind of shaking his head, well, that's neat, but I don't know if it beats, and he whipped out a reporter's notebook. I don't know if it beats this, though, and I was like, oh, you relic, you dinosaur. I didn't say that to him, but of course I was like, get with the times, man. Do you know, this is interesting about the books. Me too. You see behind me, they're blurred out, but in this house, we have hundreds of books, and they all look at me kind of balefully as I realize, yes, I know, I haven't read you, or you, and I bought more, and they're behind, yeah. I just have these conversations in my head with my books. But one thing I've done, Rob, I got to say, it feels like cheating in a way, but I'm going to tell you what I do, okay? I'll be reading a book, I'll see a passage, I'll photograph the package, and then I'll upload it to chat, and I'll say, add this to my notes for the next essay on blank. I love that. I absolutely adore that capability.
That's really good. Yeah, absolutely. I think there are so many things like that you can do. That again, it's a good. That to me is a very good use for AI. I mean, even with me reading my notes into a voice recorder and into that is, those then go into a system that I can interrogate. They're not lost. That is actually far better for me than just highlighting in Kindle and then they go into somewhere where I just don't interact with them at all. And
right.
Plus you're taking a photo. So again, that's, although you're using a digital tool, you are doing something mechanical.
Right.
And so you are interacting with it. Yeah, I think these are all good ways. I just think that it's great. You use things this way. I think it can be incredibly liberating and enable you to do your best work. I think that's great, and more of that.
I appreciate that validation because, I mean, it really does. I'll just say it. I really do at times feel like, even though you understand, this is still my thoughts, my work, but man, I feel it's just made things so much easier that I feel like, am I earning, this sounds so dumb, am I earning success I'm having on Substack? Is that stupid? Help me out here, would you, man?
That's weird, isn't it? It's kind of yeah. It's one of my favorite authors, Oliver Berkman, said on Substack recently. We had a brief exchange about it, very brief, but agreeable. And he said somebody had given him a gift recently, and it was a notebook with his name embossed on the cover, and he was trying to work out why it pleased him so much, why he was so pleased with this particular gift. And he said, he's an author. Giving him a notebook is hardly a startlingly original choice of gift. But he said, I think it's because of the thought that went into it, the fact that, and the effort that someone's made. And I said, to me, that's a bit like, that's why writing with AI, as in actually, well, in fact, I said generating text. I was going to say writing, but it's not actually writing. Generating text with AI and just using it is not the same.
Yeah.
Because there is very little effort involved, and there's a lot more to writing than generating words on a screen or on a notepad. I think this is what we miss. Where's the effort? If somebody has put effort into something, it seems almost like a kind of a quaint notion. Oh, you're only going to value it if I've put effort into it. I don't mean you have to have tortured yourself over it. I just mean you have to have engaged your brain a little bit, because I think communication is something that connects one brain to another one, and if either one is missing, then by definition it's not communication. What thoughts are you communicating? These words have just been generated on a screen, and if you use AI to get you there a bit more quickly by helping you think, I don't think that's a problem. Going old school a little bit more these days, but I have done that. If it gets you an outline, great. That's it depends what you're writing. But there's something about writing, connecting yourself, connecting the reader to the author, that I think is it just addresses a very, very old human value. We evolve for connection. Being excluded from the group would have been a death sentence, back when we
Literally
lived in a small communities and stockade, and literally, yeah. And so we have this need for connection. And if you're reading something, when you're reading something that someone else has written, it is connecting you to them. If they haven't written it, if no one's written it, it's that there's a big part of us that it just kind of recoils from it. Now, even if you're getting information, it's kind of like, not if someone, if I'm reading instructions on how to assemble some flat pack furniture, it's kind of, I don't really care that a person hasn't written it, so it's not the same with all writing. But I think with much of writing, perhaps even most writing, you need that connection to a human being. And it's that kind of time traveling almost that writing can do. You can read something that an author wrote 200 years ago and you get in their head, and that's part of the joy of it. So if you take either person out, then it's, what is the point? Or at least at a very deep level, there's a bit of us that will recoil from that. Berkman actually just posed a question, a thought experiment in his newsletter a couple of years ago, where he said, just imagine you get a note from an old friend, and you're on Facebook, and you get a messenger message from an old friend. It comes out of the blue, and you are absolutely delighted to get this, and you spend about 10 minutes reminiscing, and at the end, you just agree that you really shouldn't leave it so long next time, and let's catch up again in a month, and you feel great. And then 5 minutes later, you get a message from Meta, and it says, actually, that wasn't your old friend. What we did is our new AI has simulated that based on your interactions with them in the past and what we know about them. And so, it wasn't them. There was no person there. And his question was, does that matter? After all, you had an enjoyable conversation. And then he says, I didn't say it was a difficult question. Of course it matters, because the whole point was to connect you to your friend. The writing was supposed to connect you to your friend. So I think that's something we're missing. I think we've solved for the wrong problem. We've solved for generating text on a screen without taking account of the fact that writing is thinking.
Yeah.
Human beings will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid thinking. These apps have come along and they say, hey, we can write for you. And you don't realize it's because it's not doing your thinking for you, but often that's what it is. And so we've got this crazy situation where, people are using AI because to take away the effort of thinking, and they're not thinking. The AI generates the text. Somebody else looks at it and they don't want to read it, so they summarize it with AI. And so you've got AI producing the text, AI reading it. The humans have taken themselves out of the loop.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk about, the jobs apocalypse and people losing their jobs because of AI. One thing that humans can do that AI can't yet is think.
Yeah.
Because it's not actually thinking, just appears to. And we're refusing to think, and we're signing our own redundancy notices when we do that. Maybe we can get our AI to do that as well and not have to write at all.
You mentioned, I think, offline maybe that you've read some of the thing I'm working on, this concept of radical competency,
Mm.
and it's something. It's a series, and I think it could be something more. It could be maybe a book down the road. I don't know. There's several more editions that are already written and ready to go, just that are come out. I'm trying not to make it every week because people are going to be like, I don't want to read about this every week, but I'm trying to. I got a lot going. And just listeners, if you haven't read Radical Competency series on my Substack, there'll be a link in the show notes. But basically, to get to Rob's point, we're talking about the people who just quietly and efficiently get things done. They're no drama people. They're the type of folks who get things done, are not what you would call as a manager a problem. They're not. They don't create issues. They just make the machine go, and they make it go smoothly. But the point that I try to make is these are not folks who are just functionaries. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people, though. One key part of radical competency, in my opinion, is the art and skill of anticipation. Anticipating what the industry, the office, the boss, whomever will need next and being there on it. Whereas you just said thinking is hard. People don't want to think. Radically competent people, I think, are somewhat instinctually capable of anticipation, but it requires thought to understand how to deal with the situation before it becomes a problem or before it, ends up sucking everybody's day away for, a day or two on something. I think that is the key when you talk about redundancy and about people losing their jobs to AI. If we could kind of cross over there for a little bit, is I say that in Radical Competency. I did a particular edition where I talked about radical competency in the age of AI. And I'm saying, I said, ask yourself a question. If when all of the work that an AI can do effectively, efficiently, and correctly for you is done, how much is left of your job? If you say not much, you have a problem. If you say a lot, you're probably fine. And I said, though, I'm not saying this for you to get worried. I'm saying that right now you still have time, I think, before you're eventually made redundant. You've got to find ways to be, by thinking, by anticipating, I think a lot of people still have time. My point to you is, or my question to you is, it seems to me you and I have come a similar view of humanity, and that I think there's people who could read that and hear that right now, and they're just going to be, it can't happen to me. It's like a lot of people don't think they're ever going to die. That's never going to happen to me. Never mind that billions of humans have literally died before them and will die after them. Do you think that most people, gosh, I hate saying it like I'm not saying those people. I'm just saying, do you think, though, that most humans have the capacity to identify that, like, right now and take a good hard look in the mirror?
Some do. I think some, if you point it out to them, will do. I think that there will be an awful lot of people who don't. But that's just, if you're one of those radically competent people, then you definitely do. The very people you mention are the ones who have the capacity to do that, perhaps with a little nudge. And maybe they need to do their own PR as well, because one of the problems with being quietly competent is you solve problems and nobody notices.
Nobody knows.
So there was never any drama,
Right.
Until maybe you take a well-earned vacation and then everything, goes to hell in a handcart, and then they go, oh, gosh, that's what they were doing. I think there's that. I think that probably it's time for those people to maybe use their writing, raise their own stock value with some judicious personal PR. But I also think that, one of the things you also read about in that Substack was about how AI won't make an incompetent person competent. I forget what the phrase you used was, but
Right.
if you're not very good at your job, AI will not suddenly make you good unless it's solving a problem that, a specific problem that's, like you're overwhelmed with things to process, so, information to process, that can help with that, obviously. I think organizations, I said this back when I was doing the AI writer, I predicted then, there's a real issue here, that there's a risk that companies will bring in AI and they won't improve their processes. What they'll do is they'll use AI to scale up bad practice. and so they'll just have a bigger problem than they had before. They'll just
Right.
they'll be getting the negative outcomes far more quickly, and just and far more of them, and they never get to actually solve the real problem. Comes back to thinking again. It's like, oh, we've got a problem. Let's get AI to. We'll just do more of that, and not questioning whether you should be doing it in the first place. It's the same thing with somebody who, isn't that great. AI won't make them great, and I think that the two come together because you've got this issue of AI slop, and all of
Yes.
these reports that are being generated. That will be happening with people who aren't that good at their jobs. Suddenly they can write reports, right? Scare quotes, and they will be generating SH1T that is kind of like it's just suddenly just clogging up the works, and the company, that it will and is enabling workers who aren't that great to just have a much bigger influence on the organization, but in a negative way. So it doesn't solve problems unless you think, and unless you still have to take a step back. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, and I appreciate that you read the piece, because I think what I said was AI is not a personality transplant, and
Yeah.
you are who you are, but you need to build on what you have and what you, like you said, you need to. If you've been given this nudge, if you've thought about this, I would assume you can muster something to do a little personal PR and to identify areas where you can avoid. That kind of thing. So time has flown by. I know you've got to go. We both do. I have a daughter playing in a volleyball tournament I've got to get to shortly, but I wanted to ask you a couple more things if I could, Rob. Do you have a minute more?
Yeah.
So the well-known Seth Godin, marketing guru, he jumped on AI, and I have some things he did. He did a little Kickstarter for this. He created these decks. Have you heard of these? I'm going to tell you. Can you see that?
No,
Okay.
no, I've not heard of those.
This one's called the Mentor Deck, and it's 50 proven prompts built for Claude.ai, and it's a powerful tool that lets you work with AI to create, decide, and strategize. Turn your important work into action. So what you do, you get these cards. There's 50 cards in this deck. You sign into Claude, then you follow the simple instructions. You deal a card, you find a topic that resonates, then you scan the QR code in the back and lean into a productive conversation. AI has already done all the reading, and this deck unlocks its potential. You're talking to a patient digital coach ready to help you move forward. It's time to make a ruckus. So they have that one. There's another one, which is more of infinite adventure cards. Helps you go on a journey. It's a similar thing. And then there's another one here. It's like a tarot. It's just the beginning. Modern, the divination deck for these times. I mean, it's basically all of these prompt cards where you can have these conversations. I think it's I haven't done it yet. I got this as a Kickstarter, and I'm going to delve into it in the coming months. I think that's a clever thing. I don't know where it's going. I haven't done it yet, but are you seeing a lot of innovation in that regard with AI, of trying to maybe show people that it's not, sorry for the long question, but that I've just noticed that I'm also reading anecdotally, at least some studies that show that people are not using AI as much as the AI companies want you to believe. And they're a lot like you and me. We use it, but we are backing away a little bit. But also, they're not using it very creatively. Whereas this is really trying to bring creativity, I think, into the mix.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's what that's doing is just introducing an element of randomness, isn't it? I read a few years ago, don't know how true this is, might be apocryphal, but it just said there was an example of I don't know which tribe it was, but a Native American tribe that would, in order to find new hunting grounds, would take a piece of leather and wet it and squeeze the water out and dry it in the sun, and then follow the creases afterwards in order to find new paths. And I think, that's an old problem. We follow the same very well-worn path, and something like that, I think, is doing the same thing. It's coming from somebody else. I think that because that's analog. What you've got there. I mean, do you actually type in the prompts, or is there like an app to go with it that you select?
You follow the QR code.
Oh, okay.
And it kind of does. It walks you through. It gets you right up there, and then you start having the conversation. I assume that's when you interact more.
Yeah, I think there are people using, I like that. I think that's using things, intelligently. Just it's not the initial use case, is it?
Right. No.
I know. Again, there's so much research on AI. It's hard to know which to believe. But a few months ago, I read some research that said that the biggest use of AI is for therapy. Again, scare quotes. And people are using ChatGPT as a therapist.
Yeah.
Any therapist listening, I know it's not a therapist, but it's and not for writing. So
Right.
I think we've probably got this second and third wave, but then also there'll be people who haven't even heard of ChatGPT still, and there'll be people who are just taking their first faltering steps. I was talking to somebody last week who is, she wanted to generate an image for her business, and somebody else said, "Oh, we should just use, in her case, ChatGPT." And she said, "Oh, how do I do that?" And so she is now using it. So there will still be people who aren't using it, and then at the other end, you've got people who've become a bit jaded and a bit they've fallen out of love with it slightly. But then some of those people, there'll be other people who are finding new ways to use it. Vibe coding is one. Not saying I endorse that. My son is a coder. He's not a great fan of vibe coding. Won't even let me use the term. I'm using it to interrogate my notes, and to produce minutes from meetings. It's again, it still makes mistakes, and then it's like, well, did we say what we said, or did we say what the AI says we said? I think you still need to use your brain again and just be just mindful and yeah. If you're going to walk to your own redundancy, then do it consciously. What a positive note to finish on. But no, I think it can really help us. But that's a good example. The ways it can, the ways to use it are not always obvious.
Rob, with emphasis, tell me, if you would, tell the listeners as we wrap up here, though, who are you working with now what's your ideal clientele? Who should call you? Who should get in touch with you?
So it's generally mid-sized to particularly large organizations. Anyone who employs knowledge workers. If you're using your brain, referring to my previous answers, but if you're employed for your knowledge and for your brain, then we're there to help you communicate that knowledge and to make the most of it. And not just with writing. It's interesting because you look up communication skills training, almost no one mentions writing. It's like they just overlook that. But I think writing now connects us to these other things we want to do, with or without AI.
Right.
If you want to write a presentation, if you want to think about a meeting, if you want to have a successful meeting, you can prepare with writing. Jeff Bezos allegedly insists on that at Amazon. So it's our slogan is write, think, talk, succeed. It's joining all of those things together, and I think it's actually about 95,000 now to update that bio. So
wow.
We're still there, but AI is not going anywhere, and we are embracing it and just teaching people how to use it effectively and not fall into some of those traps I mentioned.
Right. Website, where do we go? I'll put it in the show notes, but
it's writing, obviously with a W, writing-skills.com.
Great. Well, I will tell you, Rob Ashton, the time flies, dude. And, PR After Hour, I'll flatter myself and think that you'll want to talk again sometime. So PR After Hours is maybe going to go away in one way or another, but I'm still going to be doing these interviews here and there on Substack, and I hope you'll consider coming back sometime next year. I'd love to talk to you again.
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah, it's always a pleasure, never a chore. Thanks for having me back, Alex. Been great.
It's back at you. Every time you're on, I just end up rethinking things I thought I already understood. And you'll notice, by the way, listeners will notice, Alex runs to Rob and says, "Am I doing this right?" So I think I'm okay. But really, when you help me rethink things I already understood, which is probably the highest compliment I can give a communications expert. And I mean that sincerely. Thanks for coming back and sharing so much of what you've been learning. As I said, PR After Hours is nearing last call in this format. How's that? More on that later. But conversations like this are exactly why I've loved doing the show. And who knows? Rob and I, as I say, may well find other excuses to continue causing trouble out there in the world of writing and communication together, and maybe on a different stage or under a different name, but that's half the fun. Stay tuned for that. And remember, if you've enjoyed the episode, check out Rob's newsletter. Well, it's not the AI Writer anymore, but check out his website. Keep an eye on what he's up to. Also, be sure to check in the show notes. There'll be links to previous episodes where Rob came on and shared some great stuff. And he's doing important work. And frankly, the world needs a little more clear thinking right now. Thanks for listening. And as always, enjoy that last call, because you never know. You know, the late Warren Zevon said, enjoy every sandwich. So enjoy every tipple, every cup of coffee, every conversation. And we'll talk to you again right here in the virtual lounge on PR After Hours.
You know what that means? It's last call here at the Virtual Lounge. Be sure to visit prafterhours.com for links to what we discussed in this episode and more. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And join us next time for another round at PR After Hours with Alex Greenwood.
Powered by Riverside FM.